But I learned that day, put your spouse in your phone as hot husband, wife, wifey, whatever. So they can.
I had her saved in my phone as wifey.
Actually, yeah, so I think he found me pretty fast.
Pinned
It's easy
at the
to
top
figure
of
out.
my
Yeah.
text thread.
He wouldn't find me as Sarah.
Right.
You know, so Tyler's forever in my phone as hot husband.
Good. As he should be.
As he should be.
I think you just titled the podcast Hot Husband. Welcome to Brainstoke. I'm Tom Telford with Preston Niederhauser. We're here with the Judkins in their beautiful home. Sara and Tyler, thank you so much for having us. We want to thank Levo, our sponsor of this episode, mental health professionals who are providing assessment, diagnosis, and responsible medication management. We're grateful for them. Preston, why don't you kick us off because you've got Lancer roots tied to these folks.
I do. Sarah, in high school, I don't know if you realize this, or you remember, but you taught me how to drive a stick shift in your little car.
I did?
Do you remember that?
Was it the Jetta?
No, it was the old Beamer.
Oh, yes. And who left the can of open tuna fish in the passenger seat?
Whoa,
You.
that's really early into the conversation to do that. I was more concerned about the transmission of the Beamer.
The Beamer kept going.
Did
I
it
drove
really?
The Beamer for
Your dad never
all
had to
through high
replace
school.
that transmission?
No,
Wow.
no.
Because I know I struggled there for a few times trying to drive that thing.
I know, but wasn't it you and Brooks that broke the passenger seat? Don't you remember? You had to rope it down.
Oh, I do. I forgot about that seat too. Wow, I did some damage to that car.
Who drives? I just have to ask this question because there's a paradox going here about Leighton Lancer with Beamer. Like, was that even possible?
Yeah, thanks, Preston.
Yeah. There was one Beamer in the
entire
whole
parking
city
lot.
in Leighton. And it was in the Lancer parking lot. So this was your high school car?
It was a hand-me-down.
Okay.
I think my sister above me drove it. My dad drove it, then my sister, then I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is how the Oviates rolled, right? Beamers in high school.
It was pretty easy to convince Sarah to drive too. Like I remember like asking to drive the car and you were like, sure.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Don't tell Jed.
Let's do
You're
it.
set.
For those of you that are, lifelong listeners of the podcast, you'll remember, I think, episode 2 when we spoke about Preston abusing his power as a student body officer, which included commandeering the only Beamer in the whole city of Leighton. So well done. Preston's power hunger has been forever.
Yes, indeed.
Anyway. Yeah, introduce yourselves. I don't know who wants to take that role. Maybe either one of you, but introduce yourselves, your family. We want to hear more about your background as we begin.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So, like you said, Tyler and Sara Judkins. We have 4 sons. Our oldest, Gabe, he'll be 22 next month. And he lives down in Provo, but he goes to the right school. No.
UVU.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
And then our son, Jed, who's on a mission in Brazil. And we have Drake, who is a junior at Farmington High. And then we have Dax. Dax is 9, and he's got a nickname, Dax, the battle axe. Because he's just this, tail end, fun as heck, hilarious kid. Tyler, actually, he served a mission with my cousin's husband, and they served in the Dominican Republic and set us up. So that's how I met Ty. Yeah. So we've lived in Farmington for, about 17 years. And my roots are in Farmington. I always wanted to get back to Farmington. My dad was born and raised here. My mom, she was born in Leighton, but they were Davis Darts. And they met, I think my mom was 15, my dad was 16. And so I come from a pretty big family. Most of them live around here.
Yeah.
And then Ty's family actually all lives pretty close too. So
Good old Leighton stock. When I think of your family, I don't know Tyler's very well, but when I think of your grandparents and the ones that I know, the Bittner family is a well-known name in Layton, and obviously the Oviates here in Farmington. So awesome people, good people.
Thank you.
So it's going to be fun today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So Tyler, tell us a little bit about your life growing up.
Sure. So, born and raised in Layton, Davis County, my whole life pretty much. I am the youngest of 3 siblings. I have a sister that's 8 years older than me, a brother that's 6 years older than me. So growing up, a lot of my, later years, early teens, things like that, I was kind of a only child, if you will, because they were older and they had gone out of the house already. And we had a lot of good times at the Judkins household growing up. And I have a big crew of friends that I'm still friends with to this day that we still get together and do things. But a lot of memories in the house in Layton, and we kind of had a basement and a pool table, and that was kind of the hangout place. And so yeah, we had that, and then graduated from Northridge High School in '94. Like Sarah said, went on a mission, came home. Went to college up at Utah State and finished up at Weber State. That's where Sarah and I met, and then just kind of went into the career world after that.
Is Dax the battle axe? Is he like you when you were a little guy, a 9-year-old?
That's an interesting question, because I look at my kids today, and the only frame of reference I have for them is when I was a kid, right? That's all I know from being a kid. And I look at the things that I was doing when I was a kid compared to where they're at now, and I'm just happy that they are better people than I ever was. But Dax is I don't know if he's like me. He's in some ways he is, but others he's his own person. He kind of makes us laugh. He's got a great personality and keeps us on our toes. I think it's fun having a younger one.
Yeah, he's Dax. He is quite a bit bigger than kids his age. I don't know if you've seen pictures of Dax, or I do post about him a lot, but he has a fast growth hormone that's made him, he's like quite a bit taller, quite a bit bigger kid than most kids his age. So it's got the negatives and the positives for sure for him. The doctors knew it when they sent us up to primaries, and that's where they said it was just a really rare thing that happens. He would deal with, some bullying and clothes that would be kind of hard to fit, but I think the 3 older brothers have really made him super confident. Just he knows that they have his back, and when he ran into some bullying on the bus last year from some older kids, from families that would have never thought it was their kids, that were pushing Dax out of the seat, and Jed's like, I'm going to the bus stop. I'm like, bro, you're not going to the bus stop, Jed. You're not going to the bus stop to beat up little kids. He's like, no, I just want to scare him. So Dax, I think he's gained some confidence from older brothers standing up for him. So he's a trip. He's super fun. So
that's awesome. Tyler, when you look back on your childhood, is there themes, that you think stayed with you that kind of shaped who you are today, whether that's work ethic? Something tells me your first job wasn't post-mission.
Yes, you're right. I think for anybody, those early years in our life are so formative. They stick with you for your entire life, I think. I grew up in a household with loving parents, love them to death. The expectation was that you work. You don't sit around. There were times when my siblings and I will talk about it where we would be home on the couch watching TV, and when you heard the garage door come up and Dad was coming home, you
be productive.
Turn the TV off.
Get productive.
It just feels
You put your
real.
cereal in the sink and you got out of the room, right? Because you didn't want to be seen sitting around. It just wasn't a thing that you do. My first job was working for a guy in my neighborhood all summer long. He would pick me up at 7 a.m. on like a, couple, 2-3 days a week, drove me to his daughter's house. He gave me a pickaxe and a trenching shovel and put me to work, and I helped install a sprinkling system. I worked so hard for like $4 an hour or whatever it was. But that really, for whatever reason, I enjoyed that. I felt productive. I felt like I had a purpose. I liked having my own way to pay for things if I wanted to do that. And then, other jobs morphed after that. I worked at the old Taco Time on Main Street in Layton. Sometimes I'd get on my bike and ride it down there. And after that, there was an old equipment rental store right by Dirk's Plumbing in Layton that I worked at for a lot of years. So yeah, I've always kind of worked for whatever reason.
There's a theme, which we'll come back to, but I think that's awesome to just kind of hear, those roots. Sarah, how about you? Tell us a theme from your childhood, because you danced with my wife, and the older I get and the more I appreciate just who she is. It's interesting that I think I viewed when we were newlyweds, that dance was all about like a performance that way, but I didn't appreciate until time went on how much work ethic she gained from mastering dance or going consistently to that. What about you? What did you take from those formative years?
Honestly, thinking back of the things that I was involved with growing up, I have such an appreciation for my parents. Like, I came from 7 kids, and we were all busy. We were all in sports and dance and activities. And I think back to those years, and I'm so grateful for their sacrifice, because to raise 7 kids, and I think they've all turned out to be pretty incredible humans. Like, I look up to all my siblings. They are all heroes in my life. My parents are the same. I'm really close with my parents, and I think about that actually quite a bit. I was just thinking about it yesterday. My dad, he's been diagnosed with a really rare muscle disease, and his body is eating his muscle. And my dad was a tall, super athletic, super active. I remember Saturday mornings, he would go down in the cold storage and grind up wheat and make us homemade pancakes. Yeah. Like, he was way ahead of the trend of, whole eating and healthy and taking care of himself. And I actually just told my class this morning, I taught a cross-training cardio class this morning, and I said, we are so lucky to just get out of bed every day. We are so lucky to have the gift of a body that will just allow us to get up, because my dad just can't get up. There's a lot of effort in movement, and I mean, even his entire social life of golf and friends, and he's a really social person, and seeing him lose that is your appreciation for the sacrifice of your parents just goes way up. I have felt, I guess, over the years, they really taught us how to work. They obviously taught us a lot of gratitude growing up. My mom taught us to always thank people, send thank you cards. We still do it to this day. Like, she just taught us to be grateful for people. And that has really blazed a trail for me in my life. So.
You made a comment that you have a really close relationship with Jed and Kathy. Mm-hmm. And as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm thinking about your family, and I know your brothers, your little sister Megan, Matt, Ben, mm-hmm. Rob. And I'm guessing they would probably all say the same thing about Jed and Kathy, that I've got a great relationship with my parents. Mm-hmm. And why is that? And and maybe to add to that, I think, and I look at your family and your siblings, and it seems like you're all pretty tight, mm-hmm. pretty close mm-hmm. to one another. So what do you think? What happened in the walls of that home that allowed that to grow and happen?
Oh man, I've thought about that, because my dad growing up, he was. I mean, I don't know if you remember how my dad was, but people told me all the time that he was scary, like he was intimidating. And I think he kind of used that tactic. No one really dared like mess with the girls in my family.
Yeah, I'm chuckling a little bit just because, Liza is one of 7. And I think that like you use the psychological warfare tactics that you need to control 7, right?
Yeah.
Like you just do what you can.
Yeah.
7's a lot.
Yeah, 7's a lot.
7 in how many years? I'm curious.
My oldest sister, I think the span between my youngest sister to my oldest sister is like 16 years. I want to say something.
Yeah.
So they had kids every, 2 to 3 years
Yeah.
or so. So I've thought about that too, because as we've tried to parent our kids, Tyler is really, he has taught our kids the value of work. He at a young age, he learned how to work. And he's told me stories that all of his buddies, his house was like the hangout house, and all of his buddies would sleep over and do other things, I'm sure there.
Indeed.
We don't need to go into those details. But Tyler would get up early on Saturday morning and go to work, and he'd come home and his friends are still asleep.
Yeah.
And no one else got up. So I have been so grateful for that. But my parents taught me that as well. I didn't work that young. I kind of had a job for fun. In fact, my dad didn't really encourage us to work when we were in college, but he did expect us to have really good grades. And he helped provide financially for 7 kids. I don't know, you guys. Cars, tuition, housing. Like, if it wasn't scholarshiped, my dad paid for it. So I get a little torn on that one, actually, because you feel like, or you hear, in order to teach your kids how to work, they need to work, right? But we weren't really taught that, and all my siblings are, excellent workers and have grown their own businesses. And I think the expectation was just high for success. I remember actually when I was pretty young, we sat down as a family and wrote a family motto that we would all graduate from college, that we would all excel in certain things in our life. And for the most part, that's why I say I look up to my siblings. Obviously, we do a lot of things wrong. Obviously, we've made a lot of mistakes, along the way. But maybe example. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just how impressionable kids are, and they're watching their parents all the time, even when we wouldn't think they would be. I definitely remember that as a child, watching my parents. So
It's cool. I have so many other questions. Keep going.
Well, I just remember
going.
how when we were in your home, how engaging your parents were with us, with me, and they just were inquisitive and interested, and it was obvious.
You were easy though. Like, I had really good friends. Do you know, it was easy to talk to Preston. It was easy to be around, we grew up with just awesome people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It was a great time.
We had the best memories.
When your dad asked Preston questions though, was he like, I care about Preston, or was he like, you touch my daughter, okay?
Probably. It was probably more that.
Every dad, right? I have one daughter, and I'm telling you, the questions that I ask her boyfriends is not because I love them. Just kidding, dudes. I know you're going to listen to this.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I think that, a couple takeaways there. Tyler, work ethic, you, example, and support system, from family. Those are things that are themes that I'm interested to draw into the story of really why we came, which is to hear your story of struggle in Stoke. And I don't know the best way to do that, but Preston, do you want to couch that, kind of lead into that?
Yeah, Tyler, if you don't mind, I'll
Go ahead.
I'll try to do my best. So, 2 years ago in a couple of weeks, you were on a motorcycle ride, and I'm not sure if you were with friends or if you were solo. You were solo, which might have complicated some things in the telling of the story. But and an older gentleman up near Willard, I think, pulled out in front of you, and I believe you T-boned him or he T-boned you, one or the other. And it was a horrific motorcycle accident. And just recently, there's a video of you finally learning to walk and to run on a treadmill. So it's been 2 years, and I know the story's not over, but it's been 2 years of something serious that's rocked your guys' world. So I don't know who has the courage to start to tell this story. Maybe Tyler, tell us what you can, or maybe what you remember that day. I'm assuming it was a beautiful spring day, and probably, I'm guessing the orchards were blooming in Willard. You've got to think they were.
Yeah, and I'll need to apologize in advance. It's still it's still pretty raw. It's been a couple years, and anyway, I'll do what I can to get through this. I had a motorcycle, road bike, a Kawasaki Vulcan 1500. You know, I used to love to ride motorcycles. The freedom, the wind in your hair. I'd listen to music, the feel of the bike, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
So I was heading north on the old Highway 89 through up around Willard, May 6th, 2022. It's a 4-lane road, 2 going north, 2 going south, with a turn lane in the middle. I am in the outside lane. Speed limit's probably 55 miles an hour, and I was going the speed limit. And there's a car probably maybe two car lengths in front of me on the inside lane. This is how I remember it. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. But I recall noticing the car in front of me, it kind of slowed down. And I probably didn't think much of it. Maybe I thought they were going to make a left-hand turn or something like that. I don't know. But apparently there was a car traveling south that had gotten into the median to make a left-hand turn to cross our northbound traffic. Well, it was an elderly gentleman, couple, I don't know if it was the man or the woman driving, but they proceeded to make the left-hand turn without yielding to oncoming traffic. So the car in front of me had seen what was going to happen, so they slowed down thinking this car is not going to stop. Well, my view of the vehicle making the left-hand turn was blocked by the car in front of me. I couldn't see it. And I'm just sitting back on my bike, cruising along, having a great day. And all of a sudden, the nose of the car popped out in front of the car that was in front of me. And honestly, I didn't have time to hit the brakes. I remember thinking, I'm going to hit this car. The next thing I remember is the sound of the impact. And you're going to have to cut a lot out. The sound of the impact, and then I remember the sensation of being hurtled through the air. The centrifugal force is pulling on my body. And after that, I was, the next memory I have is waking up in an ambulance, and I opened my eyes, and there was a medical professional, paramedic, sitting there, and I noticed he had my phone, and I don't know if he said anything to me or not, but I could tell that he was trying to get into my phone. And I remember lifting up my hand, my finger, because it's a thumbprint thing, right? And I think he used my thumbprint and opened up my phone. The next memory I have is actually, it's from then on, it's pretty hit and miss. I have spots of memories of here and there, but I don't recall if I was in the Brigham City Hospital or the Ogden Hospital. But my understanding is they transported me to the Brigham City Hospital, and I think I have a memory there of being on the stretcher and going down the hallway with a lot of people around me, and somebody said, "Where do you hurt?" Tyler, and I remember saying my back, because my back was just killing me, my lower back. So there was that. I mean, I could spend a long time going into everything, but the next real memory I have was arriving at the hospital. So I went to Brigham City Hospital. They weren't equipped to treat my injuries, so they transferred me to Ogden Regional Hospital. And I remember waking up, and they said, "Tyler, we're at the hospital now." And I looked up, and I saw Sara. And the only thing I could think to do was apologize. She said, "You don't need to apologize. It's okay." And why I was apologizing, that was just the first thing that happened to come to my mind. So I recall that, and then there was a brief moment where I remember receiving a blessing, and then after that, it's the story, I guess, quote unquote, begins. I don't know, but that's kind of the summary in a nutshell for me that day.
Did the paramedic call you, Sara? Is that what happened? Did he figure out? Do you recall?
So, yes, which was pretty awesome, actually. Well-trained dude. Because he did call me, and he said, I'm trying to remember the how this all happened. He sent me a text.
From Tyler's phone.
From Tyler's phone,
Mm-hmm.
as Tyler. He said, "I've been in an accident. I'm going to be okay. They're taking me to the hospital." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Because I was actually teaching a nutrition class for a construction company in Centerville. And for whatever reason that day, I could not get my presentation from my phone to a big screen. I usually put airplane mode on so I don't have interruptions. You guys, I have no idea. Like, you just put your phone on airplane mode, it works.
Yeah.
It would not. I was like, this is so weird. It keeps like flipping off airplane mode that morning. And so I'm up there teaching this presentation to all these people in the room, and numbers kept calling me, unknown numbers. And I was like, I made some jokes about telemarketer heyday something. And then I got a text, and it went up on the screen that said, "This is Brigham City Hospital. Your husband's been in a terrible accident. Please call the hospital." So that was my first.
Wow.
Yeah. You think, what would you do in like those situations? Like, you wonder how people react. And there was a door behind me, and I just froze. You don't really think. And I just turned around and walked in the door. I don't know. I walked down the store. I knew it was their offices. They kind of teed me up for, where I'd be speaking and whatever. And I went in someone's office. It was dark. I went in there, and I got that text from the paramedic, which was from Tyler. Put so much peace in my heart, in my soul, because I was like, okay, well, he texted me. He couldn't be that bad. So I called, the hospital, and I talked to the surgeon, and she said that he'd had some pretty, life-threatening things happen to him, and he tore his femoral artery. So that was the biggest. I mean, I think he lost they told me about 8 units, and his body is like 9 units of blood. So I think they got that under control. And she said, but we were trying to find a team of surgeons who can intake him today, because she said it's going to take quite a few guys and women to do this surgery. So that's why he went to Ogden Regional. So I ran out of the office building, and I called my boys, and they were in school. And I just said, Dad's been in an accident, but he sent me a text. But I talked to the surgeon. It was like I was torn in this, like, okay, well, he's stable, but he's okay. He like texts me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the greatest blessing during that time of the day, because I was calm. And I called Jed, I called Drake, and they're like, is he going to be okay? And I'm like, yeah, he's going to be okay. But, you know, meet me at home or I'll come grab you. And so on our way up to the hospital, you know, I called my dad, of course. And I said, I just need you there when we get there. And I called my brothers, of course, because I thought he's got to have a blessing. Like, you know, this is major. And of course, my brothers, Ben was the closest. So my dad, he called me back on my way. And he said, I want to drive you. And I said, Dad, it's okay. Like, I'm okay. My dad had lost his only sibling, a brother, in an airplane crash that his brother was flying. And my dad had lost his mom in a car accident in Farmington on Shepherd in '89. And so I think he just wanted to help me. He wanted, because he knew I'd be so upset, but he didn't realize that I had received this text that I was okay. So by the time we got up to the ER, we beat Tyler there. I had my boys with me. My dad got there, Ben got there, Tyler's mom. And we just stood in that, you know, where they swing the ambulances into the ER. And they pulled the ambulance in, and Jed and Drake were standing just right behind me. And they opened the doors, and I knew it was bad. And Jed and Drake just kind of fell because of the sight, you know, how he looked. And there were so many people waiting there, doctors and emergency workers. It was like this, I still remember, just like this sea of just green and blue scrubs just standing there waiting. And of course they rushed him in, and that was his memory. They like pulled him in. I went in there. He was apologizing. He was so out of it though. They had like sustained some pain, you know. And yeah, it was wild. Ben and my dad were able to give him the most amazing, peaceful blessing. And I knew he'd be okay. I didn't know why I knew that, but I just felt that. So, and then he was off. So that was my experience. Wow. Yeah.
Say a little bit more about the boys' reaction at that point, just maybe their interaction with grandpa and uncle and how that was to them. I mean, how do you comfort in a moment where everybody has question marks, right? How did that go?
Well, I think it was pretty shocking for them, because we're driving up there, and I've told them that he's
Dad
okay.
texted me.
He texted me. Yeah. That's fine. And so when they opened those ambulance doors, I mean, I just felt their bodies just, you know, I mean, so traumatizing really to see him in that kind of a state. And my boys, just the stories of their strength and the lessons that they learned through the struggles of this, they were just rock stars. They were so resilient to those weeks ahead, but they were so comforted too. I was able to comfort them a lot during that. I mean, it's almost like Tyler was going, but then my boys, you know, it's like they were kind of my first immediate concern. And by the time even Tyler's friends, I was calling all of his friends on the way up there. And my dad, you know, my brother, Tyler's mom were able to comfort the boys a lot too.
I've got a couple thoughts that I'm curious about the paramedic. And the reason why I am is because for the past 9 years, I was a volunteer in Mountain Green on their fire department with one of our good friends. But I've witnessed some similar scenarios. But I mean, it would be very rare or never would I take the patient's phone and attempt to contact the family. It's just not something you normally would do. It's up to the highway patrol typically to make that contact. So I think that's remarkable, that and how it impacted you during the early hours of that, I think is really, really impressive, really cool. Was Gabe on a mission? How long before you called Gabe, and tell me about that conversation?
First off, the paramedic. So when Tyler, he immediately went into a surgery pretty much to save his life. I mean, he was pretty wrecked. And I don't even remember who brought me this piece of paper. I don't even know, you guys. Somebody brought me a piece of paper and it had the paramedic's name on it and number. And so I called him. And I was obviously wrecked, but I was so grateful. It was like, how are you so insightful to how I would feel and how important that would be, not knowing where I was, if there were kids involved. But that was pretty remarkable to me. And of course, he was so humble. But I learned that day, put your spouse in your phone as hot husband, wife, whatever. So they can.
I had her saved in my phone as wifey.
Yes, I think he found me pretty
he was
fast.
Pinned
easy
at the
to
top
figure
of
out.
my
Yeah.
text thread.
He wouldn't find me as Sarah,
Right.
So
Yeah.
Tyler's forever in my phone as hot husband.
Good. As he should be.
As he should be.
I think you just titled the podcast "Husband."
Gabe was to finish his mission mid-June, so he was close.
Almost done. Yeah. Okay.
And he was in the office at the time, so he was actually pretty easy to get a hold of. I called my stake president, and he said that he would contact Gabe's mission president. And Gabe's stories, it's kind of funny. Gabe was just telling us a story not too long ago how his mission president just called him, and he was out walking with his comp, and, hey, your dad's been in a terrible accident. Gabe's like, how he received it. And then since the president's like, I'm so sorry. Like, it was terrible delivery. But when I talked to Gabe, there was some spirit of peace. When I had the conversation with him, it wasn't panic. I wasn't scared. I just felt this calmness around it. I had no idea what was happening. I had no idea the length of his injuries. But
So was this the same day?
yeah,
Okay.
somewhere I was
Somewhere
really
in-
blessed
yeah.
with the spirit of peace, which has kind of become my ultimate theme in my life, kind of my motto, to have peace in all things. Peace in relationships, peace in my religion, peace in my finances. Like, that would be my ultimate goal, is to have peace. And that really stemmed from that time. Yeah. That was a pretty awesome
From that
lesson.
text, maybe. Yeah.
Tyler, I'm curious to go back to you. You said something that's really interesting, that many people who we get the chance to visit with, I've captured this from Preston's own accident, when he was younger. But there's a moment when you kind of come to in recognizing what has just occurred. And it's interesting that your reaction was to apologize, to Sarah. Go further into that, if you don't mind, just why that was the emotion for you, and what the reaction was. Maybe you've had time to reflect on that again and again. I think a lot of us spouses may have moments in our marriages or lives where it's like our first reaction is, oh crap, I'm really sorry.
Yeah. So, I have thought about that, and I have thought a lot about the hospital, and I was on some pretty heavy drugs. I think they gave me some fentanyl.
So you weren't sorry?
I was sorry. That's the natural thing that came out. No,
It's the drugs talking.
it's
It's the drug.
but I fully remember everything, obviously. But it's a great question. I think as we have experienced this experience in our life, there's a sense of responsibility that I have felt, that I have caused this harm to my family. This is going to be a really long podcast. No, there's a sense of guilt there. At the same time, there's been so many blessings that have come out of it, and so much growth and so much learning. But as a husband, any husband would never want to put their spouse in a situation like that. I'm sure she was scared. The fear of the unknown. She was never a really big fan of me having a motorcycle in the first place. I was probably a little bit selfish and said, it's fine. And I'll be the first to admit it. I was a very defensive driver. I always expected somebody was going to run a stop sign or not see me at a stoplight, or somebody was going to change a lane unexpectedly. I was very cautious when I drove my motorcycle. In this circumstance, there was absolutely nothing I could do. But the only thing I can think of is that was just something that came from within me to apologize to Sara for having to have her go through this.
Yeah. I love how real you described it, though, because so many people, husband or wife, how do you live life that allows you to enjoy yourself, the passions that you have, make the choices that are still very fulfilling to yourself, and yet at times those decisions and choices ultimately can hinder those people that we love. And that's, hearing you describe that, I can feel where you're coming from as a husband and a provider, because oftentimes we get on bikes all the time. I was on, a bike ride recently. Someone came around me, and there was a moment of like, I got away with that one. Mm-hmm. And yet, do I want to give up my bike? I freaking love it. Mm-hmm. I live for it. It literally allows me to cope with day-to-day stresses of life and being the provider. So, so I get where you're coming from. That's so real as a spouse, to do the thing that you're passionate about, and yet all the time that maybe those things put you in harm's way, And 100%. So that,
yeah,
whether that is a guilt or a whatever thing, but it's real. And I think that all of us face that. When you go back to that moment of apologizing and then maybe going forward, it sounds like you go into, surgery. What's your memory after that? How do you come out of that? And how does the story continue for you?
Yeah. So this may not all be sequential, but I can go through the memories that I had. Yeah. I recall being wheeled back after arriving there at the hospital. During this time period, I also remember being what I think was like an MRI machine. I remember the sounds, and I remember waking up, and I was so drugged up that I couldn't speak, but I was in the worst pain I've ever been in my life. And the only thing I could do was moan. That was it. I couldn't speak. I couldn't say anything. I just grunted and moaned. And I heard somebody say something to the effect of, oh, he's waking up. Get that binder on him. Put the binder on. Tighten the binder. Something about the binder. And for those listening, the major injury that I had was a vertical shear of my pelvis. It literally sheared off from the other side of the pelvis. So there's a lot of bleeding, obviously a lot of pain, nerves, muscles, tendons, all the things down there. But I remember that part of it. The next part I remember is being in the hospital bed and waking up to the sound of what sounded like metal touching metal. And come to find out, what had happened, and was I had gone into surgery. Sarah can probably explain this a little bit better, but apparently my vitals were dropping and they were about ready to lose me. So they had to stop the surgery. Well, they're in the middle of the surgery and they had to stabilize my pelvis. So they put on an external fixation device on my pelvis. And the part that I'm referring to is when I was in bed and I woke up to the sound of metal, and I remember seeing the doctor down there kind of with his mask on and doing something with some rods and moving something, and I remember a metal device coming out of my pelvis in the shape of a V toward the middle of my sternum, and I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea. And honestly, the next memory I have after that is probably being in the ICU and them telling me, well, you broke your collarbone, but we want to see if you can have it heal on your own. So we're not going to fix it. And I thought, okay, all of this is just, there's just so much going on at the time. I recall trying to move my body or readjust, and I put some weight on my left arm, and I felt my bone move. And it didn't hurt. I just knew my bone was broken in my collar. And I thought, there's no way. I'm not going to sit here with a broken collarbone. So the next memory I have is being wheeled down the hospital hallway, and the doctor saying, well, we're going to go fix your collarbone. Tyler, you broke that, so we're going to go get that fixed up. And that was really that. Then everything kind of started where I do start to have a lot more memories of being in the ICU, some visitors and things like that.
He had a pretty severe concussion. I mean, he broke his neck, his back, his concussion caused him, like, I was concerned because he was not understanding things or he couldn't answer questions. That I was like, bro, we got 4 boys, things that were so common to us. Anyway, that was.
Yeah. So just to summarize the injuries, what had happened is when at the impact, apparently my pelvis took the majority of the impact, and I didn't know this, and I didn't learn this until later when I was asking the doctor. I said, tell me exactly what part of my pelvis did I break? And he said, well, your bone actually didn't break. Your bone is intact. It's all just like I said, of the ligaments and tendons and everything else just sheared apart inside your pelvis, your pelvic ring. That was the major injury. I had a very severe concussion. I was wearing kind of one of those skull cap helmet-like things. Probably not the best helmet. Didn't have anything on my face, covering my face at all. I had some sunglasses on, was about it. Excuse me, I have the helmet downstairs, but it has scrapes across the whole thing and a full crack going across the entire helmet. If I didn't have that on, I wouldn't be here today. So I had a very bad concussion, the pelvis. I'd broken my collarbone, and I broke C5, 6, and 7 in my neck. So I had a C-collar on during all of this as well. And I also...
That doesn't work very good with a beard.
No, I shaved the beard off when I was in the rehab. And then the other thing to this day that still it's an everyday reminder. I have some nerve damage out of your brachial plexus. It comes out of your neck and it kind of goes down your arm and things like that. I did some pretty bad damage there. So I don't have any sensation in my shoulder, in my left shoulder here. And for a long time, the mobility in my arm was really, really limited. But I've been able to get that back over time. So that's kind of the summary of my injuries, to put things into context, I guess.
Wow. What if you were watching the scene, like, what have you put back together in terms of, like, the extent that you flew? Like, how does that crime scene lay out, just to kind of get a visual?
So the police reports, there's been a couple of them, but one of them said I flew 60 feet. One of them said I flew 70 feet. I don't know. I reached out to the business that was near where the accident happened, where some employees witnessed it, and they were the ones that called the paramedics. I ended up speaking with an individual that was working that day because I wanted to understand what he saw. And he said, well, I don't remember. He said, I didn't see the accident, but I heard it. And he said, I can't believe how far you flew, was his words to me. So, I hit the car and it just propelled me, in the same direction I was going. I was wearing some normal shoes, some pants. I had on a flannel, like kind of riding shirt, button-up shirt, and then I also had on a sleeveless riding vest. So I had some pretty okay protection on me. Fortunately, I didn't have any lacerations or anything like that on the outside of my body. I think if you looked at me, you could.
It was wild. You guys.
Not a lot of road rash.
Zero road rash.
Nothing.
Huh.
Like,
Zero road rash.
I thought for sure. I mean, the thoughts that went through my head driving up there, like, will he tore his femoral artery? Like, you just don't know. But when I saw him, I just thought, there's just got to be some heavenly powers involved. Because how do you end up 70 feet from the accident and look pretty unscathed? I mean, if you just looked at him, it was.
Yeah.
And I have so many stories. He's like invoking so many stories in my mind. But one night in the ICU, it was maybe 2 or 3 a.m., which you really can't stay in the ICU, but I did. I just kind of hid in the corner until, I just wanted to make sure his pain was managed. And one of the surgeons came in that night and just checking on him. And so, of course, I started talking to him. And I told him, we kind of talked about the history with his health. And I said that Tyler had lost 50 pounds a year and a half before the accident, and he had maintained that weight loss. And the surgeon said he would have never survived if he was overweight. That kind of impact on an unhealthy body 100% of the time does not survive. So there was just some really, just those hindsight blessings, as I had these conversations and just experiences kind of on my own. One thing that he said a little bit earlier, if you don't mind going back to it, of course, everyone has asked me if I would let him ride a bike again. And I would never, and I know people will think I'm crazy for this, but I could never take away a passion, a hobby from him. I didn't like it. There was always something in me that knew something was going to happen to him. I just knew. I knew from years ago. I hated when he got on it, when he left, because he was obviously a defensive driver, but with cell phones now and people living unconsciously. I think people live unconsciously now. And I was always so worried about other people. And so but I didn't feel, I would never tell him he can't ride again, ever. But he had actually been in a dirt bike accident just a few months before this accident. And he tore his whole quad tendon off in a dirt bike accident. So that Friday, he had just been cleared by his orthopedic surgeon that he could get on a road bike again, which that day he did and got in that accident. So it was, I don't know, I just never felt, and I still don't, he would never ask me to take something away that I loved. I know he wouldn't. And I wasn't going to do that to him either.
And for the record, I'm not getting on a road bike again.
But dirt bikes?
Or dirt bikes I'm okay with. Snow bikes. No, there was a time in the hospital when I was in rehab when somebody said, "Are you going to ride again?" And I thought, I'm here. I'm okay. I might ride again. Yeah.
I was dying.
Well, that was when I was still on pain medication. That was before I had even been on my feet. And I cannot tell you, after going through these last 2 years, it just wasn't worth it. Just was not worth it. As much as I loved it, it was not worth it. And in fact, anything that I do these days, I am super cautious about. I'm probably overly cautious, but the thought goes through my head. You know, you see guys do. I mean, you guys are mountain bikers. I'm not, but I've seen some videos of some guys doing some really sketchy stuff. That if one little slip up happens, they're falling 50 feet or 100 feet or whatever the case is. More power to them, right? Live your life and do what you need to do. For me, and after having gone through what I went through, it's not going to happen. It is just not worth it to me to risk that type of injury. It has been just absolutely, physically, emotionally, just absolutely draining. Not only for me, but for my loved ones.
How long were you in the hospital, Tyler?
So after I had gotten stabilized, they put me in ICU. I think I was in there about 3, 4, or 5 days, something like that. Then they kind of moved me to like an intermediary location, still within the hospital. And then I still wasn't able to go home, so I went to a rehab center within the hospital. So I think from the time I was in the accident on May 6, 2022, I believe I came home May 26, 2022, if my memory serves me right. So about 3 weeks I was in there. Yeah.
One other thing he said, if you don't mind me going back to it, when he was saying, I have never experienced such pain, and going through that was so hard. But there was also so many blessings. The lesson of really feeling emotions has really resonated with me. Like, it's okay that it sucked. We've felt every emotion, right? It's been hard. I've been angry. I've been mad. I've been sad. I've been happy. I feel like we've been so blessed. But it's okay. Like I've told my boys, if you feel like crying, then you cry. And if you feel sad, then be sad and sit in those emotions. And there's no shame around that. I feel like the culture and society has, boys don't cry or don't cry over that. Well, if you're sad about it or you're frustrated, then feel it. Feel all those feelings around that and recognize the gift of emotions and that God gave us those sensations. He gave us those feelings, not so we could shove them down, but so we could feel them and help them shape who we are as a person and to have more empathy for people that we see go through really hard things in their lives.
I think I appreciate what you're saying, and you shared with us prior to starting to record about your decision to start to share Tyler's story. Will you share that with us now again?
So it was the second day. So they took Tyler back to that surgery. He was in that first surgery. He had a few surgeries, and that first surgery lasted about, I think it was around like 6 hours. And I think that's when it got pretty real for my boys. Like, this is pretty bad stuff. And Drake, my 17-year-old, had said to me, "Mom, are you..." And I guess with the caveat of my boys really don't like social media. They're usually like, "Don't put me on there. Don't talk about me." They don't love it. I think it's fine, but they don't love it. So for Drake to say this was like, wow. He said, "Are you going to put Dad's story, his accident, on social media?" And I just didn't know. Like, sometimes in my judgment, Sarah, wonder why like people share stuff that they share. But now I see, because I feel that is an avenue for healing for people. but I said to Drake, because I hadn't even thought through it. I said, Drake, I don't know. I don't know if this is like, do we let the whole world know or everybody into this? And he was pretty emotional when he said, I just feel like if you would share it with people, that more people would pray for Dad. And I was like, game over.
Yeah.
Like, I will say all the things.
Yeah.
And in the process of saying all the things, I have just been really overcome with how our struggles, my struggles, have helped other people. Like people that have reached out to me that I haven't spoken with in years. The beauties of social media, right? The connection that people have with other people when we're vulnerable, and we're so like hesitant to share our weaknesses, especially on a social platform. But people are going to take it how they're going to take it. And if they know you and they know your heart, I think things are taken with a lot more understanding and non-judgment. But that ended up to be a huge blessing because people, I can't even tell you the people that came out of the woodwork for our family. It will change me for the rest of my life. No doubt. And the empathy that I have for other people, like when I see other people going through hard things, I'm like, man, I don't get that, but I know that sucks. And we can do such simple things to reach out to people. And I know that we receive promptings. I know that people come to our thoughts and our heads, not by coincidence. I think those things truly are planted from a higher power, from God, to reach out to other people. I think as humans, we are on this earth to save our fellow men. And it can be a text. You guys, it can be nothing. The text that I receive, the acts of service, the gifts, just showing up, you'll hesitate. Like, well, it'd be kind of weird if I showed up on their doorstep and I brought them dinner or I did this for them because they have all this family. And it's not really about that. It's just about showing up and just doing the action behind caring for people. It was so awesome, you guys. I had 3 people, different times during Tyler at the hospital. Just show up with blank checks, like whatever you need. And I was like, wow. It was so moving that people were so willing to give. It was really out of this world. It was awesome and still is to this day. I still get messages because people that have been through trauma, they know it just doesn't end after 2 years. And year 2, I feel like has been way harder than year 1. So anyway.
When you look back, you mentioned a little bit about Drake. So, in that moment when Drake was saying, okay, the thing that I don't want my mom to do the most, right? Like I could totally hear it. My kids like threatening my wife, like, do not post about me on so in that moment when Drake was like, hey, I think we should do this. What was it about Drake's faith in that moment? Like, what was he asking to see happen?
I know he wanted his dad to be healed. I know he wanted his dad to be okay and that he believed in the power of prayer.
Yeah.
This
moment's bigger than us.
Yeah. And during Tyler's second surgery, which was a pretty major surgery, he ended up going in at like 7 a.m. And unbeknownst to me, the kids are home. I'm not even here. I mean, I had some pretty amazing spiritual experiences a couple nights on some drives, but people were just like blowing through the door, doing the laundry, cleaning the house. My sisters were phenomenal. There was so much food here. If I'd roll in at like 3 a.m. and just zombie walk, it was just like the fridge was, there was so much food. And that surgery, Jed called me. So he was the senior at the, how was he a senior at the time? Yes, he was going into a senior year. He called me at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon on that day. So Tyler had been in surgery for hours. And he said, Mom, is Dad out of surgery yet? And I was like, no, I hadn't even heard from anyone. I was just sitting in the ICU in his room. And I said, I'll let you know, why, what's up? He's like, we've just been like worrying about him, and we're just wanting to know how he is. I said, I'll just call you as soon as I know. So about 5 o'clock, Jed called me again. He's like, Mom, what's the update? I'm like, I don't have one. They haven't come out yet. But I said, I'll call you, of course. And so it was like 5:15, 5:30. I called Jed, and I said, hey, he's out. He's out of surgery. I haven't seen him yet. They just told me he was out of surgery. It was all done. It went well. And he said, is he awake? And I said, I don't think so. I think it takes like, an hour or two. And he's like, okay, just let us know. And I was like, Jed, he's okay. And he was like, I know, but Drake and I started fasting yesterday morning at like 5 a.m. And they had football practice at like 5:30. And then they had lifting practice. So they had been fasting. I mean, it had been like hours and hours and hours for boys in high school with food all around them.
Two practices.
Yeah. And actually they had a night practice. It was just, so I think they were, but just their faith in knowing that act of sacrifice could help, their dad that was pretty remarkable. And when I told Tyler, I think we felt like their faith and their sacrifice really helped in that surgery. So,
Yeah, you got four studs of kids, don't you? Mm-hmm. Tyler, I hesitate to ask this question, but I think it's, just forgive me. I've got to imagine there were some awful days, some dark days. Do you mind sharing some of the hardest parts of this whole process, and maybe we'll follow up with some other questions on how we dig ourselves out of that, or how you did in particular.
Yeah. Just one thing that I'll come to that. I wanted to mention when Sara was talking about the amount of overwhelming support that we had received as a family as a result of my accident. And as she's talking, I'm thinking it was absolutely incredible. And you ask yourself, well, this event happened to me. It's a visible thing. People can see it, about it, and the help just flooded in, which was awesome. And this is actually probably a good segue into what you asked. There is another aspect of this when you talk about the dark days that you can't see, and you don't know that people are struggling. Mm-hmm. And when she was talking about that, I thought, there's a lot of people out there that battle with a lot of things worse off than I was that aren't physical. And they don't have that support of a community and friends and people to come and help them and offer to give them a blank check. So if I could leave a takeaway, and one of the biggest takeaways that I've taken from my accident is go out of your way, be kind to people, look for opportunities to help others. Don't pass any judgment or make any assumptions about people. Inquire with your neighbors, with your friends, with your family. just be there for people. I think that's a pretty big part of what I've taken away from this. You mentioned about the dark days. Yeah, there were some really, really hard times. Some of the memories that I have are laying in the hospital bed and you can't move. You just can't move. I could feel every single wrinkle in the sheet underneath me because I was on my back for probably, I don't know how long I was on my back, maybe 2 weeks, something like that, where I literally was not off of my, off of my back. From the physical, that's the physical standpoint, right? Every little thing I could feel. I had the oxygen tube in my nose. I could remember feeling that and how raw, your nose would get. I would have to have the nurses come in and I would say I need a boost. Well, what they would do is they'd grab this sheet that's underneath me and lift my body up to hoist me up a little bit higher in the bed because you would always slide down. And once about every 3 or 4 hours, I'd have to have them come in and readjust the pillows around my pelvis because the pain was so great that I had to move, had to do something, and sometimes you just couldn't get comfortable at all. It was some of the memories that I have that'll stick with me forever. From the time I got in the accident, May 6th, the first time I took a shower was May 16th, which was my birthday. That was my birthday present. I got to, and for your listeners, I was in a wheelchair for 60 days after this. I couldn't bear any weight on my pelvis. And I was in the rehab center, and it was an absolutely humiliating experience, but it was a good experience also because the feel of having water run on your back after not having that for so long. But at the same time, I'm in my birthday suit trying to transfer from a wheelchair to a shower chair with nurses, right? Here I am, this, middle-aged man trying to take a shower, and I need the help of these people to do
Happy
it.
45th.
Yeah, happy birthday, right? One of the other things that was super hard was the first time that they hoisted me up out of the bed and put me in a chair. Sara, I think, has this posted on her social media, but I think I've glanced at it one time. I can't go back and look at it because they hooked me up to a crane in the hospital bed that was attached to the roof and kind of swung me out. And they said, we want to see if you can just at least sit up in a chair. The methodology these days is you have an injury like this, you need to move. You need to get your body moving and get your blood going. I think in years past, it was just lay there and let your body fix itself. So they were very adamant that I was moving. And I said, okay. So they hoisted me up and they sat me in a chair, like a hospital chair, right? Not one like you guys are sitting on. And they said, well, let's just see if you can sit here for like 5 minutes. Or no, actually it was like 30 minutes. They said, we'd like you to sit here for 30 minutes. Okay. So they sat me in the chair, then they left. And it wasn't more than 2 minutes. I said, I can't do this. I have got to get out of this chair. Call somebody. So we'd call, nothing. Call again. Oh, well, the person that's helped you, they went to lunch right now. And I was like, I don't care where they're at. You get them back here and you get them to get me back in this bed because this is killing me. I say that in the same breath that I'm not complaining about any medical professional out there because my appreciation for them is through the roof. I can't tell you how thankful I am for people that take their lives and they dedicate it to helping other people, regardless if it's my orthopedic surgeon that put me all back together to the person that came in my hospital room and emptied my garbages. They all helped. And I wouldn't be here without them. So I'm very fortunate from that standpoint. as far as just expanding on what you asked, those are some of the physical things that were hard. The mental side is just as hard, if not more hard, than the physical side. You can tell it's been 2 years. I still get emotional about this. I get emotional thinking about it. I get a lot of thoughts run through your head. I think at times, what if I hadn't made it? What if I didn't make it through this? Where would my kids be? Where would my wife be? What would they do? How would they handle things? I mean, I'm sure they would have picked up and moved on, but it would not have been easy. Those things, those thoughts come to your head. And just the unwinding of what has happened, with as time goes on, it gets less and less, but it's still a real mental battle. Being confined to a bed for that amount of time. So when they sent me home, I was still in a wheelchair. Sara was talking about her dad that has some physical disabilities within his legs that he can't walk. I've experienced that. Fortunately, I was able to get better. It doesn't look that way for him. When you look at things like that, I've learned, as hard as they were, it's all about your perspective. And I told myself at the beginning of this accident, stay positive. No matter what, keep your mind right and stay positive. And I don't know when that happened to me, but I remember being in the rehab center and I was in pain, and there's a patient down the hall from me that I would see in the workout room with a helmet on, right? They had been in had some traumatic brain injuries, and they're physically, you can tell something is wrong with their mind, and they're trying to learn to walk again. And I thought, I'm gonna be okay. That person, they might not ever recover. I'm gonna be able to walk again. What about the guy that was in the accident that can't walk now, that's paralyzed? What about the guy that is, so there's always somebody worse off than you. So I use that to say, things could be worse. And given the circumstances, I'm going to be okay. So whatever you do, Tyler, stay positive. I never let a negative thought come into my head. If it did, I would get rid of it. If I was frustrated, I just wouldn't say anything. I didn't want to even verbalize that I was having a hard time, because I think that, for me anyway, would just encourage more negativity. So I just wouldn't verbalize anything. There were times when I was in my bed and nobody would be home, and just the thought of getting out of your bed, getting in a wheelchair, coming down, doing whatever you need to do, maneuvering back, just putting your pants on, putting your clothes on. I don't even know how I did it. I had to get my wheelchair in to take a shower. Luckily, we have a shower big enough. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question, but there were some really hard times, both mentally and physically.
Do you remember the moment, I'm guessing at some point, and maybe do you remember when you felt the sun and you're like, you know what, all's going to be well, did you have a moment like that? I'm wondering if it was standing on the track of your son's football game. Mm-hmm. I've seen some pictures, of family photos there, but when did you have a couple moments similar to that?
Yeah. So I don't know if I had a defining moment where I said everything's going to be okay. When you said the sun, I had memories coming back of being in the hospital with the curtains closed all day, every day, because I had such bad concussion. I couldn't stand the light. Mm. But I also remember a time, I think Sara was probably there, when I was actually able to go outside and feel the air on my body and the sun, the heat from the sun on my body and things like that. It was so refreshing. Yeah. But now that you mention that, I would have all these follow-up doctor visits and I don't remember which doctor visit it was, but it was kind of toward, maybe I was toward the end of, maybe 6 months after the accident, something like that. I was meeting with my orthopedic surgeon and asking him questions. And I said, well, as it sits today, I got 3 rods in my pelvis and kind of a bracket on the front of my pelvis too, a metal bracket thing. But I'm asking him all these questions, and he turned to me and he said, you're going to make a full recovery. And that was so reassuring for me to hear him say that, because as a patient, I wanted answers. I wanted to know what my injury was, what is it going to take to get better, how did it happen, what did you do to fix it, how do you fix it? All these questions are in my head. How long is it going to take? Can I talk to somebody else that's had the same injury? They don't tell you that information. They don't share with you, okay, here's what you can expect. Here's the pain that you're going to have. My experience was I would have pain in a certain area for a couple weeks. That would go away, and then something else would rear its head up. I'd have pain again for a little bit. That would go away. That happened for a long, long time, and it still happens a little bit today. But they don't share with you those types of things. I have a really good friend of mine, Jeff Richards, who at the time, a couple months before my accident, he was in a very severe accident as well. And he was doing some snowboarding and had an accident and hit a tree and broke his ankles and his legs and his knees and everything else. And it's been good to have him to be able to share these stories and have somebody to talk to throughout this, because anyway, our stories are pretty similar, but that got off track a little bit, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
When you reflect back, Tyler, we started off and I asked you a question about, something tells me you've worked. When you were in the hospital, when you were going through this process, what was it about you that said, I'm not going to give too much voice to the negativity? Had you learned that? Were you drawing from something that was way back as a kid or as a youth, or something where you're like, hey, if I can keep my mind right, I can get there?
Yeah, 100%. I learned it from my dad, and I lost my dad in 2020. He was 80 years old when he passed away, but he had struggled with some health problems throughout his life, diabetics and some liver problems and things like that. I don't ever remember him complaining, ever once. And looking back on it, I think he was in some pretty bad pain. He had days when he was uncomfortable and just all kinds of things with his body. And I look back on it, I thought, I don't remember him ever complaining about anything. And I remember as a kid, if I ever complained, it didn't sit well with him. He didn't like that I was complaining. And I've thought about that, and I think that's probably what resonated with me through this process is, in my opinion, it doesn't do anybody any good to complain. We all got problems. We all have things we got to deal with. What good is it going to do to verbalize it? Maybe it will, maybe it won't for some. I think I think that's where it came from, was my dad.
Yeah.
Was my dad. And I just didn't see a benefit in telling Sarah, hey, I slept for an hour last night. I'm in so much pain I can't even roll over in bed. I could go on and on about all the things I wanted to complain about, but it's not going to do me any good. It's not going to do her any good. I didn't see the purpose of it, so I just didn't do it.
Yeah. What's remarkable is we get to sit with people in this, type of an environment often. And some of the themes that I've kind of captured in my own mind over time is we often think as parents, what are the traditions? What am I passing down to my kids? What what genes are they getting? Are they getting, the big gene, the skinny gene, the whatever gene? There's a lot, that we pass down in genes. But in terms of what do we pass down in terms of mindset? And it's interesting that's your mindset went back to, in the mental health world, they would say in times of trauma or stress, you revert back to your coping skills, right? At the very core, what are you going to rely on when it gets tough? When struggle hits, what are you going to go back to? And your mindset was not to complain. Work. If it's to be, it's up to me, right? These things that we don't necessarily know that we got from our parents. You talked about your family when I asked you about work. But these are those intrinsic qualities that become such a part of our ability to face struggle, is just what mindset do I have? What's inside? And that's so powerful.
I'm a firm believer that my effort to stay positive and stay away from the negative helped my physical ability to heal. In other words, I think your mind can help your body heal. If you think I'm going to be in pain forever, this is never going to go away, I think that could exacerbate itself physically. And I think the opposite is true. I'm going to get better. Things are going to be okay. Life is good. Those things can manifest themselves in a physical manner as well, I think.
I feel like you guys were so well equipped. This may not be fair to say, and you may not feel that way, Sarah, as you shake your head, but man, you guys were well equipped to handle something really hard, some unbelievable hard. Yeah.
Yeah. In my line of work, in health coaching is what I do now. And that's the focus, is mindset work. And it's really interesting. You think people come to me to lose weight and get healthy. And that's actually the easy part. I mean, following the programs, I now just guarantee you will lose weight. You will get healthy if you follow this program. But you won't sustain it. A healthy lifestyle will not be second nature if you don't work on your mindset. So thankfully, I was fortunate enough to have worked on my mindset quite a bit before the accident. And thankfully, I was in a really good place going into this. I didn't last that long, but I mean, it also taught me, it's been really motivating to continue to work on my mindset to be ready for the next thing.
Yeah.
Because something else is coming.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But
I was shocked, frankly, before we started. For our listeners, we're standing in their kitchen and you actually said, I would do it again because of who you have become, right? What you are equipped with, being in the mental health space. In fact, last week I was at a conference, all mental health professionals, for 3 days. And as I sat and listened to these mental health professionals speak to each other, it was apparent that almost all of them, because of their own life challenges, led them to be in the mental health space. And that's also a theme that we have found, with people that we've met with, that people who have faced, huge trials, huge struggle in their life, they're most well equipped to be able to serve and lift other people who face the same things, And so it's interesting that you would say, I would do it again. Double click on that for us. What does that mean when you say I would do it again?
well, I didn't endure physical pain, right? I didn't have to go through physical healing. So I'm sure Tyler wouldn't do it again.
I beg to differ.
You would do it again?
No.
Oh.
You went through some physical.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
you're
I meant like broken.
I know what you
But
meant.
yes, I've actually struggled with a lot of things physically that have manifested later from trauma, and just suppressing the trauma.
Yeah.
It physically showed up in some other things in my health. But I mean that, like, there are so many experiences that happened to me through the accident, I have felt I've always been pretty convicted in my faith and never questioned, and I still don't. I think without the accident, I would not be as close to God as I am now. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't endure the things that I have endured. And there were just some really awesome experiences where I knew that he knows me, and I know that he knows me. And I feel like I don't call on the powers of heaven enough. Like that's something that can be, like we have access to that every single day.
Yeah.
If we want that. But I had two in particular experiences with the other side of heaven. One night I'll share, I guess. I hope this is okay.
Yeah, of course.
It's my story.
Yeah, you freestyle.
Okay.
You go for it.
At first, when I had shared this, it felt like, God, you just don't really hear about this stuff. You hear about it, but
Yeah.
I had never experienced heaven. And I don't remember which experience happened first. One night, I would walk the hospital halls a lot. In fact, when they brought Tyler into the ER that night or that day, I walked, they kind of, shuffled us into this waiting room. And when I walked into the waiting room, I mean, it was pretty scary. I mean, of course, right? I was pretty scared. And I walked into that waiting room, and there was a huge picture of the lion and the lamb. And there was I had this overwhelming peace come over me. Again, like I just kept getting these manifestations of peace. And when on one particular night, I was walking through the hospital halls by myself. It was dark. I loved it. It was just a time of like contemplation and prayer and just thinking. One of the blessings is that I was forced to slow down. Everything in my life stopped. My day-to-day living just stopped. And I was blessed with being able to sit in the ICU for hours and hours and hours and be in a place that I had never experienced before. So when I would walk those halls at night, I loved it. And so one night I wanted to walk back down to the ER area and just sit with that picture. And there were angels with me. I felt them. I felt them in that space. I felt like I could reach out and touch them. They were there with me. And I just knew that it was real. I knew that heaven was real for me. And that was such a special experience to go through that. And the other experience I had, I left the ICU pretty late one night again. It was like 3 a.m. And I walked out to my car. My car was the only car in the parking lot. I was so tired. I cannot express how tired I was. It was like exhaustion. I'm sure you felt that. You guys ride, you go through things. Like mentally,
This is a different level, though. This is the emotional.
Yeah,
like
it was.
The emotional tank is physical is one, but the emotional tank
Yes.
on top of it, that's a different fatigue.
Yes, and it is so real to have both of those collide. And I was walking out to my car and I was thinking, okay, I just have to get on the toll road because it was in South Ogden Regional. And if I go on the toll road, which I was like buddies with the toll road people by the end. It was awesome.
You're not handing out that $1, are you? Tell me you're not handing out the
Do you really-
$1.
How can I prepay?
Oh, jeez.
Oh yeah, always.
Yeah.
They don't leave the toll box.
No, they don't.
Anyway, then I just could jump on 84,
Yeah.
right, and then head to Farmington. And I remember like, okay, if I just like hold my eyes open, like I'll just be able to like make it. Like, but I was scared. There was like this half like, well, what if I fell asleep? Like I'm not tired. But you can't stay at the ICU. You really can't. They don't let you stay overnight. So I had made the bad decision of staying so long, but I did. Anyway, so I got in my car and I pulled out of the parking lot right toward the toll road. And I got to the toll road. I paid my $1 and I pulled down to where you jump on 84. And my car, there was someone sitting on my left and there was someone in my passenger seat. And then I had 3 people in my mid seat. And I was so alive. I felt so much light. And I drove home no problem. I remember I was so tired, you guys. I woke up the next day. I was sleeping on top of my made bed because my sisters would come and the whole house was perfect. And I had my shoes on. I was fully clothed. And I woke up like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? I couldn't remember from like 84 to home. And it was so real. Like I could feel the presence of angels. And I knew they were ancestors. And what was interesting was conference was right before the accident, right, in April. And I had been praying like, I was searching for some answers for something else and I just needed some guidance. And oddly enough, through Saturday and Sunday, I felt to know my ancestors and to really know who Tyler's ancestors were. And I was like, I'm not into genealogy, people. Like, where do I start? How am I going to know that? And then, weeks later, I would feel and know that our ancestors were there. They were there. It's it was, how does Tyler's body go 70 feet in the air without a scratch, tiny 2-3 scratches, and go through that kind of impact and that kind of breakage and just be set down 70 feet. The heaven is on earth. I know it.
Tyler, did you have a moment where you knew God knew you?
It's an interesting question. To answer it, no, I didn't. I didn't have anything like Sara had.
He was too drugged up.
As you find yourself asking yourself a lot of questions, like, Casey Smith.
I do.
James Parker.
Yeah.
Okay. For those of you that don't know them, those are 2 guys that I went to high school with. They're not with us anymore. Casey's story is tragic, and so is James. And their passings weren't anything, not physical, not doing anything, not physical injuries, I guess is what I'm saying. But you look at that and you say, 2 of the best guys that I know that would do anything for anybody, they're not with us anymore. And here I am out cruising around on my motorcycle, and I hit a car going 60 miles an hour, and I'm alive. How does that work? Where's the reconciliation in that? How do you answer that? And I've come to the conclusion that I don't have an answer. I don't know. I just simply don't know. I think all things happen for a reason. I don't think we understand what the reasons are. I think we can speculate, but for me and my world and my mind and how I think, I just simply don't know and don't have an answer to that. However, it brings me comfort to think that I was protected in some way. Did I have a feeling, felt something supernatural? I didn't. I can't say that I did. But when I think, how did I live? How did I make it through that? Maybe there are people on the other side that helped me and that overlooked or looked for me a little bit or looked out for me a little bit. That brings me comfort, but at the same time, that's hard because you got guys like James and Casey and a lot of other people that have been through a lot worse than I have and that have lost their lives and that are maybe they're battling a terminal disease. Maybe there's a lot of fear and unknown in their lives. And why does one person get, I don't want to say treated, that's not the right word, but their outcome is different than somebody else's? It's something that I just haven't been able to reconcile. But it does bring me comfort to think that, I guess.
Yeah. I asked, would you go through it again? Sarah mentioned, yeah, I would do it again. Not necessarily the accident, but I think possibly what you're referencing is that you like who you've become as a result of it. Would you say that's true, Tyler, for you, that you like yourself now, the capabilities, the compassion, who you've become, maybe what your family's become, what your sons have learned from it, maybe the quality of your marriage? Speak to that just a little bit in terms of what the accident has allowed you to become.
Yeah, that's a great question. It has allowed me to realize nothing really matters except the ones that you love and the ones that you care about. At the end of the day, that's what matters. And you could offer me all the material things in the world, all the money, all the this, all the whatever it might be. Nothing is worth more than my family to me. And I think a lot of people would say that, right? That's not just something unique. And I don't think that's something that is some revelatory thing that happened to me post-accident, but it's real for me now. I feel it. I know it. I understand it. I'm when things take me away from being with my family, work or commitments or whatever the case is, the only thing in my mind is I got to get back to my family. I got to get back. If I'm downstairs working, doing some things, and Dax is sitting up here on the couch, there's more guilt in there for me now than there used to be, because here I am, I'm alive. My son has his dad with him. Had the outcome been different, I wouldn't have the opportunity to walk upstairs and sit down and watch a movie with him or spend some time with him. He'd be a 7 or 8, 9-year-old boy without a dad, right? So there's a little bit more guilt when it comes to that because I can't just stop what I'm doing, because then everything stopped, right? You got to balance things. But at the end of the day, for me and in my house, what matters is your loved ones, how you treat them, how you treat others. You live a Christ-like life. You look for opportunities to serve. You give when you can. You provide when you can. And I think the other important thing is you accept help when you need it. Mm-hmm. I think at times, especially as men, we have this wall around us that says, you know what, I'll suck it up. I can deal with this. I don't want to put on any vulnerability. If I ask for some help with something, it's going to show that I'm not able to be a man and do what I need to do. And that's just not true. It's just not the case. And one thing that I've learned, somebody said to me one time, is if somebody can see that you're in need of help and they offer to help you. If you say no, you're denying that person an opportunity to help somebody else. I don't ever want to deny somebody an opportunity to help somebody else, even if that somebody else happens to be me. So I have no problem accepting help. I'll take it any way I can get it. But those are some of the major takeaways that I've had.
I would imagine, Sara, for your health coaching business and what you're doing, your compassion and lens now is entirely different.
Oh, totally.
How am I going to say no to Coach Sara? Like, I don't want to get out of head coach. Yeah, like what mountain you've climbed, right? Who's not going to answer to that, in terms of your coaching. So tell us how it's impacted that.
I have realized people are in so much pain. I think statistically we can obviously see that in this country, how much pain people are in, and the rise of mental health and diseases and cancer. And, but it's taught me to really listen to people and empathize with people and just meet people where they're at. That's probably the biggest thing. Instead of me thinking they should be a certain way or they should do things a certain way, sometimes I used to actually get a little bit, probably maybe irritated, just kind of bugged, like, just do this. You're the one that told me you wanted this so bad and this would change your life, because when you improve your health, you improve every area of your life. Everything, motivation, confidence, relationships, performance, all the things. And if it was that easy, then we'd all be healthy, right? And we would be free from disease and all the things.
Yeah.
So I've just learned to just meet people where they're at and not be emotionally attached to where they're at, and just to be okay with where they're at, and just let them know that I am just there to support them and to be a resource and cheer them on. And I mean, I'm going to challenge them for sure and push people, but it's made me enjoy the job a lot more just by being loving and accepting. And yeah, it's been pretty awesome.
That's cool. Even sitting with you today, it's sacred to hear people suffer. That sounds weird, but my wife's a therapist, sitting with many people, talking mental health and tragedy and so many challenges that people have faced. There is something sacred about the suffer. Maybe finish each of you just reflecting on that thought of how does suffering or hurting or struggling, how has that reframed maybe the way you feel about, you've talked a little bit about it, but just life in general.
I think that it's kind of like I don't know a good way to verbalize it, but kind of the refiner's fire, right? I think you hear these stories about people that grow up with nothing from a monetary standpoint. They had to share a room with their 6 siblings and barely had some cereal and wore hand-me-down clothes and things like that. That they turn out to be very wealthy individuals later on in life. And I think that's because they've experienced something that they don't want to have experience again, right? So they've have this mindset that I'm not going to let that happen to me again, so therefore I'm going to do this. I lost my train of thought a little bit. Your question was, how has the experience, say it again?
Yeah, the suffer.
The suffer.
In other words, the mantra of Brain Stoke is struggle and stoke. How has this struggle, led to your stoke?
Yeah, okay. So I know that I can get through anything after this. There is nothing that is too dark or too deep or too hard that me or anybody else can't get through in this life. I don't think we're wired or set up to do it on our own. I think we need the help of others. I think, echoing what Sara said earlier, we're in this together. And I could go on for days about the amount of help that we receive, like she said. It just came in from everywhere, and it taught me again that's what mattered. The suffering helped me to realize life is short, live it to its fullest, be responsible in doing so, as opposed to riding a motorcycle. But, live your life. You do you. I think it has taught me, the suffering has taught me to let the little things go. Don't get caught up in things that don't matter at the end of the day. If something is happening to you, are you going to remember it next week? Is it really going to have that big of an impact on you? Do you really want to spend the time and energy fighting with something that at the end of the day really doesn't matter? So let it go. I think that's what part of the suffer was for me. Was I got this pain. It's not going to do any good to complain about it. It's going to go away eventually. Let's just wait it out and see what happens. So that has led to my changed frame of reference, which I guess you could call it the stoked, right? It means that I've learned to be a more aware individual, I think, of people around me, of people that are in need. Today, if I pass somebody in the street that appears to be struggling, I'm going to help them. Before, I think I had an attitude of, you know what, everybody's hiring. You can go out and find a job. You got no excuse. Kind of this hard mentality, right? That doesn't do anybody any good, in my opinion. Let's show some love and let's be kind. And you know what, maybe they could go out and get a job. And maybe they could do those things, but you know what, they're not. And they need some help. And if I'm in a position to help, then I'm going to go ahead and do that, because that's okay. If it doesn't, if anything, it'll help me just be a better person. So I think that's what I've come out of this process with. One of the maybe
awesome.
top 5.
Great mindset shift. How about you, Sara?
I would say that I've learned that we're a lot more alike than we think we are, meaning that everyone has stuff. Everyone has hard stuff. And something I've done is to pray to be led to people who need me. And every day, you guys, it works. It's been so awesome to say that small prayer and to know that we are the vessels of changing people's lives. And it can just be something so small, and it can be something so big. I think our capacities are huge to be able to help other people. And I guess my second lesson is to be as non-judgmental as I possibly can. I think naturally we do it as human beings, and I think sometimes it's necessary at times. But if we just considered everybody, knowing they're up against something, there's something going on, that we would just have compassion on everybody. And it's drawn me to people. It's drawn me to people that I haven't really been drawn to before. And I've just created relationships with people that weren't really in my path before. And it's really benefited me the most, honestly, because it's allowed me to be a less judgmental person and to be more service-minded around helping others. It's been pretty awesome.
That's cool. my takeaway is just hearing both of you think peace and confidence.
Yeah.
You know, the peace that you speak with is so rare. You can tell you've sat with a lot of suffer and people who suffer, and your compassion is off the charts. And I fully believe when you say, Tyler, you can do anything. I believe that the rest of your life will be full of a lot of accomplishment in helping others do it. You just, you've sat in that. You've conquered literally a crazy experience. So thank you for having us and sharing your story.
Yeah, I
It's been
appreciate you
awesome.
being vulnerable. Yeah.
Well, it's not very hard for me to do. For whatever reason, I'm
You could have
the,
asked us anything. I mean, there's a lot more.
thank you for the invite. It's been awesome.
Yeah, good.
So nice.
You've had your daily dose.